The last thing I felt was the crushing weight of the black, freezing water. My car had pierced the skin of the frozen lake like a jagged needle, and as the cabin filled with glacial liquid, I had clawed at the window until my fingernails ripped. I remembered looking up through the cracked windshield and seeing the moon distorted by the ice above. Then, the silence. The absolute, frigid silence of death.
Sienna?
Earth to Sienna. You've been staring at that billboard for 3 miles. The voice hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, my lungs burning as if they had just been emptied of a gallon of lake water. I wasn't underwater. I was in the passenger seat of our SUV. The heater was blasting, smelling faintly of dust and Trevor's expensive cologne. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that told me I was alive, even if my brain couldn't process how. I'm sorry, I said, my voice sounding like gravel. I looked down at my hands. They were whole. No ripped nails. No blue tint to the skin. I just got a sudden, dizzy spell. It's the altitude, babe, Trevor said, flashing that effortless, movie star smile that had made me fall for him 3 years ago. We're almost at the cabin. A weekend of skiing is exactly what you need to take your mind off the insurance paperwork. The insurance paperwork. My blood turned to ice. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. Thursday, January 15th. I had died on Sunday, January 18th. I was back. I was 3 days away from the moment Trevor would cut my brake lines and watch me sail off a mountain road. Right, I whispered, clutching my seatbelt. The insurance. You did sign the final policy update this morning, right? Trevor asked, his tone light, almost casual. Before we left? I saw it on the desk. In my previous life, I had laughed and told him I'd taken care of it, touched that he was so concerned about our future security. Now, looking at the sharp line of his jaw and the way his eyes never quite settled on me, I saw the predator behind the mask. He didn't want a future with me. He wanted the $2 million payout that would trigger if I had a fatal accident on this trip. I signed it. I lied, my mind racing. I hadn't actually signed it yet in this timeline. The papers were still in my bag. I just hope we never have to use it. Of course we won't, Trevor said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. His skin felt like a snake's. But it's better to be safe than sorry, isn't it? I looked out the window at the towering pines, their branches heavy with snow. They looked like white shrouded ghosts standing in a row. I wasn't going to die this time. I was going to turn this mountain into a cage for him. The cabin was a sprawling, rustic mansion of cedar and glass, isolated on the edge of a cliff. As Trevor unloaded the bags, I retreated to the guest bathroom, locking the door and sinking to the floor. My hands were finally shaking. I pulled my laptop from my bag and began to dig. In my first life, I had been the fragile one. Trevor had spent a year gaslighting me, telling me my memory was failing, that I was too stressed to handle the finances. I had let him take over everything. But now, with the clarity of a dead woman, I saw the holes in his story. Sienna? Are you okay in there? Trevor called out, knocking softly on the door. I'm making cocoa. Just a bit of travel sickness. I shouted back, my voice steady despite the bile rising in my throat. I accessed our joint bank accounts. There it was. A series of large withdrawals over the last 6 months. Money funneled into an offshore account I didn't recognize. He was preparing to disappear, to start a new life with my death as his seed money. I then checked his deleted emails. My breath hitched. The lake is deep enough. No one recovers anything from there until spring thaw. Ensure the brake lines look like they snapped due to cold weather fatigue. He had been planning this for months. He had researched the physics of my death. Here's your cocoa, darling, Trevor said as I finally emerged. He handed me a mug, his eyes searching mine for any hint of suspicion. Thanks, Trevor, I said, taking a sip. It tasted like ash. I was thinking maybe we should go into town tomorrow morning. Get some extra supplies? I heard there's a great search and rescue station that does public safety tours. I'd love to see it. Trevor's brow furrowed. Search and rescue? That sounds boring, Sienna. We're here to ski. I just have a bad feeling about the weather, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I want to be prepared. Whatever makes you happy, he said, but for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He didn't like me taking initiative. He liked me small. He liked me quiet. He didn't realize that the woman he was talking to had already felt the water in her lungs. The search and rescue station was a fortress of salt-stained trucks and heavy gear. I walked in, my heart pounding for a different reason today. I was looking for him, the man who, in my past life, had been the only one to weep when they finally pulled my body from the lake 3 months after the accident. Can I help you, ma'am? I turned. He was exactly as I remembered from the newspaper clippings I'd seen in that brief, ghostly state before the reset. Caleb Stone. He was rugged, with eyes the color of a stormy sea, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. I'm Sienna Hayes, I said, and as our eyes met, a strange jolt of electricity shot through me. He froze, his hand pausing on a coil of rope. Sienna, he repeated, his voice a low rumble. He looked at me with an intensity that felt like he was seeing a ghost. That's a beautiful name. You look familiar. Have we met? I don't think so, I said, but I'm staying up at the Blackwood cabin. I wanted to ask about the roads. Specifically, the cliff pass near the lake. Caleb's expression hardened. That pass is dangerous this time of year. Black ice. If your car isn't perfectly maintained, it's a death trap. That's exactly what I was worried about, I said. I glanced back at Trevor, who was standing by the truck, looking bored and irritated. I lower my voice. Caleb, I need to talk to someone. I think I'm in danger. Caleb didn't blink. He didn't tell me I was being paranoid. He stepped closer, his presence a massive, grounding force. What kind of danger? My husband, I whispered. I think he's going to kill me on Sunday. Caleb's jaw tightened. Most men would have laughed. Caleb just reached out and gripped my arm, his touch warm and firm. I've seen a lot of things on this mountain, Sienna. Gut feelings are usually right. Why do you think that? He wants the insurance, I said, the words spilling out. And he's been acting strange about the car. I'm off duty at 5, Caleb said, his eyes locking onto mine with a fierce protectiveness. Meet me at the diner at the base of the mountain. Don't let him see you. If he's planning what I think he is, we need to move fast. Friday night was a nightmare of feigned affection. Trevor kept trying to get me to drink wine, but I dumped mine into the potted plants when he wasn't looking. I needed my head clear. You're very quiet tonight, Sienna, Trevor said, leaning against the fireplace. The flames cast long, dancing shadows across his face, making him look like a demon. Still worried about the roads? Just a headache, I said. I think I'll turn in early. Good idea, he said, kissing my cheek. We have a big day of skiing tomorrow. And on Sunday, well, Sunday will be a day to remember. I waited until I heard the rhythmic sound of his snoring from the master bedroom. I slipped out of bed, draped in a dark parka, and crept to the window. The moon was high, illuminating the driveway where our SUV sat. I saw a shadow move. Trevor was outside. He wasn't in bed. He had stuffed his pillows to make it look like he was asleep. I watched through the frost-rimmed glass as he crawled under the front of the car. He had a pair of heavy-duty snips in his hand. I felt a cold, sharp stone form in my stomach. This was it. The moment my life had ended the first time. I watched him work with clinical precision, nicking the lines just enough so that they would hold for a few miles, but fail completely under the pressure of the steep descent down the cliff pass. He slid out from under the car, wiping grease from his hands with a rag, a look of pure, cold satisfaction on his face. He looked up at the bedroom window, and for a second, I thought he saw me. I ducked back into the shadows, my heart thudding so hard I thought it would burst. He came back inside, moving like a ghost. I heard him slip back into bed. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, realizing that I was sharing a bed with a man who had just signed my death warrant for the second time. I pulled out my phone and sent a one-word text to Caleb. Done. Sunday morning arrived with a blinding, cruel beauty. The sun reflected off the fresh powder with such intensity that I had to squint even behind my polarized sunglasses. It was the kind of morning that invited hope, but as I watched Trevor load the picnic basket into the back of the SUV, I knew it was a day designed for a funeral. "The lake is going to be gorgeous today, Sienna," Trevor said, his voice bright and airy. He leaned against the driver's side door, twirling the keys around his index finger. He looked like the picture of a devoted husband, but I saw the way his eyes kept darting to the front tires. I was thinking, why don't you drive? I want to get some high-shutter speed shots of the trees as we descend. The light is perfect. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. He wanted me in the driver's seat. He wanted the person who would be blamed for losing control to be the one behind the wheel, while he sat in the passenger seat, ready to, miraculously, escape at the last second. "Sure, Trevor," I said, my voice eerily calm. I reached out and took the keys. They felt freezing, even through my leather gloves. "I'll drive." As I pulled out of the driveway, the engine roared with a power that felt like a threat. I knew this road. I had memorized every curve in my last life, every place where the guardrail thinned, and every spot where the drop-off became a one-way trip to the bottom of the lake. We began the descent, the road winding like a ribbon of gray through the towering, indifferent pines. "It's a bit fast, isn't it?" Trevor asked about 10 minutes in. He wasn't looking at his camera. He was looking at the speedometer, his body tensed like a coiled spring. We were approaching the Devil's Elbow, a sharp, hairpin turn that hovered over the deepest part of the ravine. "Maybe you should slow down, babe." "I'm trying," I said. I shifted my foot from the gas to the brake. I pressed down, and for a split second, there was resistance. Then, with a sickening, hollow give, the pedal hit the floorboard. My stomach dropped into my shoes. Even though I knew it was coming, the physical reality of the failure was terrifying. "Trevor, the brakes. They aren't working." "What?" he cried, his acting impeccable. He gripped the dashboard, his knuckles white. "Pump them, Sienna. Pump the brakes." "I am." "There's nothing," I screamed, letting the car gain speed. The wind was whistling against the glass as the SUV accelerated toward the edge. The lake shimmered below us, a dark, frozen eye waiting to swallow me whole again. "Trevor, we're going over." "Jump, Sienna. Jump," he yelled. He didn't try to grab the steering wheel. He didn't try to pull the emergency brake, which I knew he had also tampered with. He reached for his door handle, his body leaning away from me. He was ready to roll out into the soft snowbank before the car hit the precipice. But I didn't jump, and I didn't steer for the cliff. At the very last second, when the guardrail ended and the abyss opened up, I yanked the wheel hard to the left. I steered the car toward the uphill embankment, a steep slope of thick, heavy snow and brush. "What are you doing?" Trevor shrieked. I didn't answer. I braced my arms as the SUV left the pavement, slamming into a massive snowdrift. The impact was violent. The airbags didn't deploy. Trevor must have disabled those too, but the wall of snow acted like a giant, white pillow. The car lurched, groaned, and then came to a dead, jarring halt, buried up to the windows in white powder. Silence returned to the mountain, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine. Trevor was gasping, his face the color of the snow outside. He looked at the lake, which was still 50 yards away, and then he looked at me. His mask of concern was gone, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock. You missed the turn," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "I saved us, Trevor," I said, turning to look at him. I leaned back against the headrest, my hands finally beginning to shake. I felt a cold, predatory grin spread across my lips. "Aren't you happy? We're alive. It's a miracle, right?" He didn't look like a man who believed in miracles. He looked like a man who had just lost everything. I'll go for help," he said, scrambling to open his door against the weight of the snow. "Stay here. You're probably in shock." "Oh, don't worry about me," I whispered as he struggled out of the car. "Help is already on its way, Trevor. But not for you." Trevor didn't look back once. I watched through the cracked side mirror as his dark figure trudged through the knee-deep snow, moving toward the trailhead half a mile away. He walked with a frantic, jerky energy, the walk of a man whose carefully constructed house of cards was falling down around his ears. He thought I was sitting in the passenger seat, catatonic and broken by shock. He had no idea that the moment he disappeared into the treeline, I was out of the car, moving with a strength I didn't know I possessed. My boots crunched softly on the packed ice. Every breath felt like a victory. I followed his trail at a distance, staying low behind the heavy, frost-laden branches of the hemlocks. My heart was a drum in my ears, but my mind was a cold, sharp blade. "I'm in position." Caleb's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece he'd given me at the diner. It was a low, steady sound that acted like an anchor for my frayed nerves. "He's approaching the clearing. Stay back until I give the signal, Sienna. Let him say it. Let him bury himself." I reached the edge of the clearing. It was a small, circular opening in the forest where the snow was undisturbed, save for the man standing in the center. Caleb was wearing a dark, heavy trench coat and a brimmed hat pulled low, his back turned to the path. To a desperate man like Trevor, he looked exactly like the fixer he'd been told to meet, a man willing to look the other way for the right price. "You're late," Caleb said, his voice roughened and deeper than usual, muffled by the collar of his coat. "There was a complication," Trevor hissed, his voice echoing off the frozen trees. He was pacing, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "The car, she didn't go over. The bitch steered it into a snowbank. She's still alive, sitting in that wreck like a goddamn statue." "That wasn't the deal," Caleb said, still not turning around. "The deal was an accident. Clean. No survivors, no questions. Now the car is sitting there with tampered lines and a living witness. That's a lot of risk for my people." I know, Trevor snapped, his face contorting in a mask of pure, ugly greed. "I'll pay you double, triple. I just need it finished. I can't have her talking to the insurance adjusters or the cops. If they look at those lines, they'll see the snip marks. I did exactly what you said. I cut the front lines just enough to fail under pressure. It should have worked." I felt a wave of nausea. Hearing him say it out loud, so casually, was a different kind of pain than the accident itself. He wasn't just a killer. He was a bookkeeper of death. "So you're admitting you sabotaged the vehicle?" Caleb asked, his tone flat. "Of course I did. I told you that on the phone," Trevor yelled, his frustration boiling over. "I put the snips in the trash can at the cabin, just like we discussed. It looks like a tool forgot by a mechanic. Now, are you going to help me finish her off, or do I have to go back there and do it myself?" "I think you've done enough," Caleb said. He turned slowly, and as he did, he pulled a small, glowing digital recorder from his pocket. The fixer persona vanished, replaced by the lethal, righteous intensity of the man who had found my body in another life. Behind the trees on the opposite side of the clearing, 3 figures in search and rescue uniforms stepped into the light, followed by the local sheriff. Trevor froze. The air seemed to leave his lungs in a single, pathetic gasp. He looked toward the path where I was standing, and I stepped out from the shadows of the oaks, my eyes locked on his. "Sienna," he stammered, his voice jumping an octave. I was just, this man is a crazy person. I was trying to negotiate. I was trying to find someone to help get the car out." "I heard everything, Trevor," I said, my voice echoing in the stillness. "I heard you complain that I didn't die fast enough. I heard you offer to pay for my murder. You didn't just cut the brakes, Trevor. You cut everything we ever were." He looked around, realizing the tactical map of his life had just been redrawn with him in the center of a target. He tried to bolt, but the snow was too deep, and Caleb was too fast. The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. It was a sharp, mechanical snap, the sound of the trap finally closing on the man who had turned my life into a hunting ground. Trevor stood in the center of the clearing, his arms wrenched behind his back, his face a distorted mask of disbelief and burgeoning rage. "This is a mistake," Trevor screamed, his voice cracking as the sheriff tightened the metal restraints. Sienna, tell them. Tell them I was just scared. I was talking nonsense because of the crash. I'm in shock. I stepped closer, my boots sinking into the crusty snow. The cold was biting, but I didn't feel it. All I felt was the searing heat of his betrayal. You weren't in shock when you crawled under the car on Friday night, Trevor, I said, my voice low and trembling with a decade's worth of suppressed pain. You weren't in shock when you researched the depth of the lake. You were a predator, and you thought I was your prey. You're a psycho, Sienna, he spat, his eyes wild as he lunged toward me, only to be yanked back by the sheriff. You set me up. You've been acting strange since we got here. You lured me into this. I didn't lure you into wanting me dead, I said. I just stopped being the person who would let it happen. The sheriff, a man named Miller with a face like weathered granite, shoved Trevor toward the waiting squad car at the trailhead. Save it for the lawyers, Hayes, he said. We've got the recording and we've got the forensic team at your cabin right now bagging the snips you mentioned. You're not going anywhere but a cell. As they led him away, Trevor didn't look like a husband anymore. He didn't even look like a man. He looked like a small, hollow thing, a parasite that had run out of a host. I watched until the blue and red lights of the police cruisers began to flicker through the dark pines, the sirens wailing a lonely, haunting tune that faded into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after a storm, when the world is left stripped and shivering. I felt my knees begin to give way, the adrenaline that had been my only fuel finally evaporating. I've got you, a voice said. Caleb was there before I could hit the snow. He caught me under the arms, his grip firm and steady. He didn't just hold me. He anchored me. I leaned my forehead against the rough canvas of his jacket, smelling the scent of pine needles, cold air, and something deeply, inherently safe. He's gone, Sienna, Caleb whispered, his hand coming up to cup the back of my head. He's never coming back. Do you hear me? I hear you, I sobbed, the first real tears finally spilling over. They were hot against my frozen cheeks. I can't believe I loved him. I can't believe I almost died for a man who didn't exist. You didn't die, Caleb said, pulling back just enough to look me in the eye. His stormy sea-gray eyes were filled with an intensity that made my heart ache. You fought your way back. I've been a rescuer for 12 years, Sienna. I've seen people give up in much smaller storms than this. But you're a survivor. You believed me, I said, searching his face. In the station, when I told you I was in danger. Why didn't you think I was crazy? Because I saw the way you looked at him, Caleb said, his thumb brushing a tear from my cheek. And I saw the way he looked at his watch. A man who loves his wife looks at her. A man who's waiting for a payout looks at the time. I wasn't going to let that clock run out on you. He led me toward his truck, his arm wrapped around my shoulders to keep me warm. The metallic taste of the lake was a distant memory now, replaced by the crisp, clean air of a mountain morning. As he opened the door for me, I realized that I wasn't just leaving Trevor behind on that mountain. I was leaving the version of me that believed I deserved to be small. Where to now? Caleb asked as he climbed into the driver's seat. Anywhere but here, I said, looking at the road ahead. Just keep driving until the sun comes up. Spring didn't just come to the mountain. It fought its way through. I sat on the porch of Caleb's cabin, listening to the symphony of the thaw, the roar of the creek as it swelled with melted snow, and the rhythmic thump of ice sliding off the cedar roof. For months, that ice had been a symbol of my own life, frozen, brittle, and waiting for a hard enough hit to shatter. But today, under the insistent warmth of a May sun, everything was liquid and light. The trial had ended 3 weeks ago. I remembered standing in that courtroom, my hand trembling as I held the railing, watching Trevor being led away. He had looked so small in his orange jumpsuit, his movie star charm stripped away to reveal a hollow, desperate man. When the judge read the sentence, 25 years for attempted first-degree murder, I didn't feel the surge of triumph I expected. I just felt a profound, quiet peace. The weight of the past Sienna was finally gone. You're doing that thing again. Caleb's voice rumbled softly from behind me. I turned as he stepped onto the porch. He wasn't wearing his search and rescue uniform today, just a soft, faded flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing the corded muscle of his forearms. He set 2 steaming mugs of coffee on the small wooden table and sat in the chair beside mine. "What thing?" I asked, a small smile playing on my lips. "The 1,000-yard stare," he said, reaching out to capture my hand. His skin was warm, his palms slightly calloused, and the way his fingers entwined with mine felt like a silent vow. "You're back there, aren't you? In the courtroom? Or at the lake?" "A little bit of both," I admitted, turning my hand over, so I could trace the lines of his palm. I felt a sudden, sharp need for him to be closer. It's strange to be allowed to breathe without wondering if the air is going to be taken away. Caleb didn't say anything at first. He just pulled my hand toward him and pressed a slow, lingering kiss to my knuckles. The touch sent a jolt of heat through me that had nothing to do with the sun. Then, he stood up and gently pulled me to my feet, wrapping his arms around my waist. I leaned into him, my head resting perfectly in the hollow of his shoulder. I could hear the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart, a sound that had become my favorite melody. "I have something for you," he whispered into my hair. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver key. "It's for the studio in town. The lease is in your name. You said you wanted to start your photography business. I thought maybe it was time for you to start looking through a lens you actually like." I looked at the key, then up at him. My eyes blurred with tears, not the cold, salty tears of the lake, but something sweet and overwhelming. "Caleb, you didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said, his gaze dropping to my lips. His hands tightened slightly on my waist, drawing me even closer until there wasn't a breath of space between us. "I want to see the world the way you see it, Sienna. Because the way you look at me, it makes me feel like I've been found, too." He leaned down, his mouth meeting mine in a kiss that tasted of coffee and the promise of 1,000 tomorrow mornings. It wasn't the frantic, desperate kiss of someone trying to be saved. It was the slow, intimate exploration of 2 people who had finally come home. His hands moved up my back, his touch firm and possessive, grounding me in the present moment. I tangled my fingers in the hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him closer, letting the heat of him melt the last of the winter in my bones. I looked out at the valley, where the lake shimmered like a blue jewel in the distance. It wasn't a grave anymore. It was just water. And as Caleb's thumb traced the line of my jaw, I realized that I wasn't a survivor of a tragedy anymore. I was a woman starting a life that was finally, beautifully, my own.